What is it about children and the paranormal? Kids tend to be the most likely among us to see something, but adults will all too quickly tell them that it's all in their imagination. And while that may be a valiant, well-meaning attempt to stop nightmares, it seems that the adults may not always be right. Today's stories involve figures that only appeared to kids, presences that introduced themselves, stayed for a while, and then said goodbye when the time was right, and a few things that had absolutely no business being anywhere near a child's bedroom window at midnight. We are starting in Yorkshire, where a young Wayne heard something very unsettling. One paranormal experience I had when I was young. I was about 14 when one night I was asleep in bed and I heard sobbing and crying. I thought my sister was in the other bedroom having another nightmare. I left it thinking that she'd be okay, but after a while I thought I'd go and check on her. Yeah, a bit of crying, sometimes it's all good and they'll go back to sleep, but then there's just that invisible threshold when they've been crying for a bit too long, isn't there? I climbed out of bed and headed through the dark to my bedroom door and opened it. There, leant up against the toilet door on the landing, was a young girl with blonde hair, dressed in white, sobbing into her hands. She must have realised I was there and turned to look at me. Then I noticed she had no eyes. They were just black holes where her eyes should have been. Immediately no. I'm sorry that you're going through something, but I cannot help you with whatever that is, because now I have issues of my own to deal with. Being young, I didn't know what to do. She stopped crying and I ran back into my bedroom, jumped into my bed and got under the covers. I must have fallen back to sleep. When morning came, I told my parents what happened. My mum said that she had heard the crying before. My father decided he wasn't taking any chances and went to our local church and asked the priest to come and bless the house. After this, we had nothing else happen. This was when we lived in a town in Yorkshire. Love that, Dad. Absolutely no messing about. Let's just nip this in the bud right now. Respect. This next story, though, was less sheer utter terror that has you running and diving under the covers, but enough that it still sticks with you, years after it happened. It occurred on what was probably a summer day in 1963, as some months earlier, maybe my 5th birthday or Christmas, I was given a pale blue tricycle with a ring bell on the front handlebar. I was at the back of our small red brick terrace house, situated on one of the now forgotten impoverished streets in Sutton Coldfield that were demolished during the 1970s. I was seated on the bike when I closed my eyes in the warmth of the summer sun. It was then that someone put their hand over the back of my right hand as I was gripping the handlebar. I opened my eyes in surprise, and although I was expecting to see my mother, there was nobody there. I quickly realised that she was in the kitchen because I heard her moving about, probably washing or preparing a meal. But when you feel something so real to you, someone has just tried to get your attention by putting their hand over yours. I was mystified, but without getting off the bike or moving from that spot, I closed my eyes once again to see what would happen. And I had that same sensation of a hand being deliberately placed over the back of my right hand. Feeling more confused than scared, I got off the bike and went straight to the kitchen to tell my mother, because I needed an explanation, and I thought at that age that adults knew everything. She looked perturbed, but beyond asking exactly what had happened, she had little to say, only telling me that it was in my imagination, and confusingly, never do that again. Never do that again. That's a very specific response to something that was supposedly just imagination, no? It didn't make sense, because all I had done was to close my eyes while I was on the bike, and all I knew was that someone had twice placed their hand over the back of my hand, and that they were invisible to me. Although I could tell that she was somehow perturbed by what I had said, I could tell that it was an annoyance, and that she was more interested in what she was doing, or else she would have gone out the back with me. could not forget it, and despite my mother's warning, I was curious enough to try it again on another day soon afterwards. Budding paranormal investigator right there. Start me young. I placed the bike in the same spot, sat on it, and closed my eyes. Sure enough, it happened again. I felt a little scared, but at least I knew it was not my imagination. I have no memory of when I was first told a ghost story or when the nature of a ghost was first explained to me, if it ever was. My mother had told me at some point that the dead can appear, and she'd had several paranormal stories about things she or members of her family had experienced, but I never forgot what had happened, and at some point, as I grew older, I began to believe and understand that I had encountered a spirit. It must have been around a decade later when our neighbour, Mrs. Small, mentioned a girl I had never heard of before called Victoria Austin. Victoria, like myself, had been an only child, and she had lived just 3 doors away. I'd grown up knowing Mr. and Mrs. Austin. They lived in the house that had what my mother called the Green Bay window. Mr. Austin never spoke, but his wife did, although there was something unfriendly about her manner. I had thought they were childless until Mrs. Small mentioned their daughter Victoria to me. Fair warning now, there are some parts of this story I can't say, but basically Victoria had passed away aged just 9 years old. Mrs. Small had said that she'd been a lovely girl, but was very upset about the circumstances surrounding Victoria's death, holding Victoria's own mother responsible. I often wonder if maybe it was the spirit of young Victoria who put her hand on mine. Not to frighten me, I think, but in play. The mother, Sarah, died in 1975 at the age of 68, and curiously enough, she mentioned Victoria to me for the first and only time not long before she herself suddenly died. I made out that I hadn't known, which, with hindsight, was wise, as thinking back, Sarah was probably curious to know if I had heard anything, and knowing her, she may have sought a confrontation with whoever had told me. A few years before her death, Sarah had started to take care of an elderly spinster lady who lived further up our street. Among my elders, it was rumoured that the woman was wealthy. For one thing, she had a telephone, which was rare in our community. Sarah boasted to anyone who would listen about how she expected a legacy from the old woman. But as the old lady had a nephew that she was close to, who was in business as an optician, nobody took Sarah seriously, though they would never have dared say it to her face. As it turned out, Sarah died long before the older lady. That Sarah, what a wonderful human being. Which that is sarcasm, by the way, in case that doesn't come across. It was remarkable that her widower husband, Harry Austin, who had never been seen to smile, and who had avoided conversation with everyone, soon developed a relationship, and even moved in with his lady friend. People often, and perhaps pointedly, remarked how happy he looked. I even noticed how he would now warmly greet people and smile. Harry survived his late wife by 19 years. Survived her by 19 years and wouldn't stop smiling afterwards. I think that's a case of make of that what you will. According to my mother, I had an imaginary friend in my childhood, although I feel doubtful about it. My mother mentioned it to me when I was in my 40s, claiming that there had been an imaginary girl that I used to talk to in the garden. There may be something behind it, as I have the vaguest memory of being in my father's shed and talking to a friend, a young girl that only I could see. I must add that I found it in no way concerning. Whether I deliberately imagined her or not, I cannot tell at this distance in time. I was an isolated only child, and my mother was highly controlling. I was not really allowed to have friends from school visit me or allowed to visit them. The ones she saw were always deemed bad in some way. So it is possible that I did imagine that I had a friend to talk to. I have a memory of my mother appearing at the shed door once, demanding to know who I was talking to, and I can still see the image of a girl in my mind's eye. She was serious, concerned, I think. It is possible that in my embarrassment at being caught by my all too often angry mother talking to thin air, that I made up an imaginary friend on the spur of the moment. Yet why do I have an image of a girl with long dark hair, wearing a dress, and of talking to her? Even of her telling me that I was growing up and that when I got to be her age, I would no longer see her. I think that was preparing me, and it made her a bit sad. Was I talking to Victoria? I do not know. Wow, though, for you to have that image in your mind of this girl, regardless of how you felt about being caught out by your mother, it certainly makes more sense then. Her reaction to you feeling the hand on yours when you were on the tricycle, possibly something she had also been through as a kid too. So many questions that will go unanswered there. So heartbreakingly sad too. This next story from Joshua, though, is much shorter, but raises just as many questions. I was visiting my family friends with my parents, and while at their house, I was in my friend's bedroom playing hide and seek. I turned around to count, and that is when I saw a ghost of a girl wearing a white dress with a blue ribbon, dripping from head to toe in water, standing in the bedroom of my friend. Like I said, so many questions. Who was this little girl? Why was she standing in this random bedroom? And why was she dripping in water? I need to know what happened next, but also, Joshua, completely understand if you'd rather not relive that. What a thing to turn around and see. But this next story from Bethany involves a phenomenon that even people in the paranormal can't quite agree on. But what a lot can agree on is that it is an utterly terrifying thing to experience. I've always had experiences with the supernatural ever since I was a child, and things got really intense when I turned 14 years old. But that's a story for another day. Oh, I'm completely invested in that story now too. However, the story, or rather experience, I'm telling you today involves myself and my twin sister. And to this day, we hardly speak about it, but when we do, we agree it was one of the most horrific experiences of our lives. Those are very strong words. Going back to around 2011/2012, I was still living at home and just started college with my twin sister and my mum. It was around the summertime, late one evening, but still light out. I'd say about 8 p.m. at night. My mum was asleep upstairs, and my sister and I were downstairs watching TV in the living room with the curtains open. She got up to get herself a drink and suddenly paused and was staring out the window. I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "There's two girls sat on the end of our drive." I said, "What?" and got up to look out the window, and sure enough, there was two girls sat next to each other with their backs to us. I asked, "What should we do?" My sister, let's call her E, went to the door, opened it a crack, and said loudly, "Excuse me, can we help you?" The girls, startled, turned around and stood up. They walked up to the front door, and at this time I managed to get a look at them. The first and eldest, I would say, was probably about 13, with her hair tied up but under her jacket hood. And she was with what I'm assuming was her younger sister, who looked no older than about 8. When they got to the front door, the eldest said from under her hood, I could only see from her nose down, "Yes, do you have anything we could eat, and could we use your phone?" Now you have to remember, not everyone had mobiles in the late noughties, so my sister and I looked at each other and decided to let them in, thinking in case they were in trouble. Yeah, I think that would be any 14-year-old's natural reaction, right? Creepy looking little kids or not. So we opened the door, and I suddenly got a feeling of dread over me. But they're just young girls. Thought it can't be anything sinister. I left E with them while I went upstairs to quickly tell my mum, who was asleep, what was going on. She said, "Get them out." I said, "Why?" "Because they could be going around people's houses to see if it's easy to burgle or steal." At the time, I remember thinking, what an odd thing, but as an adult, I actually agree with her. But anyway, I went back downstairs to find that they had gone. I said to E, "Where are they? Where did they go?" She said, "I don't know. I went to the kitchen to get them a chocolate bar, and by the time I came back, they were already halfway down the road." We quickly looked out, but they were gone. We checked to see if anything was missing, but couldn't find anything out of sorts. We decided to check Facebook and local papers in case anyone else had experienced something similar, but we couldn't find anything. Yeah, what a very odd thing to experience. Didn't even hang around for the free chocolate bar. Fast forward, and myself and my sister decided to go to bed. Now, from my bedroom, if you lay on my bed, you could see through the landing to my sister's bedroom door. I was just about falling asleep in bed when all of a sudden, I saw her bedroom door open. And that was when I saw them. I really don't like where this is going. 2 girls in Victorian clothing staring straight at me with horrible, evil smirks on their faces. And I realised it was the girls we had seen earlier. Except they had horrible, black eyes. I tried to scream but couldn't, and I realised I was trapped. I wanted to warn my sister they were in her room and they were turning towards her. I couldn't move and couldn't scream. Eventually, I managed to get myself off the bed from what I assume was my sleep paralysis and bolted into my sister's room to find her breathing fast and panicked. I shook her awake and she took the biggest breath and bolted upright. "Are you okay?" I said, my own heart still racing. No, I'm not." "Why? What happened?" "There were 2 girls in here, holding me down on the bed, laughing and screaming in my face." A cold shiver ran over me. "What did they look like?" I asked. "They were wearing Victorian clothing and had black eyes." 2 sisters experiencing the same encounter from different sides of it. That is a swift note from me. We both sat there in silence trying to calm each other down, and once I told her what had happened to me, we decided it must have been those 2 girls we experienced earlier. To this day, I'm not 100% sure what it would be called, as the house alone had some ghost stories, so I believe it was almost a hub that things were drawn to, and myself. But from bits and bobs I've learned over the years, I believe we had encountered what are called black-eyed children. We hardly speak of it, and when we do, we both adamantly agree it was truly one of the most confusing, terrifying moments we've experienced together. Yeah, as I was reading that through for the first time, my face was twisting in horror more and more with each line. I'm going to guess from the way that you tell it you never saw them again, which, totally okay with that, once is plenty. But very interesting that Bethany mentioned that the house had other ghost stories too. A bit like this next story from Jordan, who grew up around unexplained activity. From when I was born until middle school, I lived in a small town called Spring Creek in Nevada. Spring Creek is such a beautiful place with mountains and wildlife everywhere. It's the kind of place where you go out onto your porch in the morning to see a herd of deer on your front lawn. That does sound idyllic. Round here, you will get mugged for a co-op meal deal by the giant house spider that lives on our porch. But for its beauty, there was also a darkness to the place, or at least in the house I lived in. It was a small mobile home with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, dining room, and an addition off the one side. The house was located on a hillside. I still love the house itself, but the spirits on its land, I'll never forget. The house was laid out in a way where one side of the house, the one towards the front, was the master bed and bath. Then attached to that was a small hallway that if you walked straight, it would lead to the living room. If you took a left, it would lead you to the dining room, kitchen, and then the laundry room, and into the small bathroom. We called it the kids' bathroom. The living room and the other rooms ran parallel to each other. In the laundry room, there was a door to the addition, a room that my biological father had built and connected to the house. If you went through the living room, you'd find another hallway that had 4 doors. And then on the left, there was a door to the kids' bathroom again. That room had 2 doors. And then there was a small closet. On the right was mine and my sister's room, and then at the end of the hall was my brother's room. The layout of the house is important. This house was super haunted, and had been that way for as long as I could remember. It was bad enough that there were places that you'd avoid once the sun went down. It's one thing knowing that you're living with something else in the house with you. Another thing entirely when there are areas that you have to actively avoid in your own home after dark. In this house, there were 4 main ghosts that need to be brought up. On the side of the house with the kitchen and addition, there was a hill. On this hill, there was some sort of animalistic-like ghost. It looked human, but crawled around on its hands and feet. I've heard enough already. What? If you went outside, it would stalk you and even chase you. It became the standard of when you would take out the trash, as soon as you would get off the porch, you would sprint to the trash can and sprint back inside as fast as you possibly could. Not only would this spirit hunt you, but late at night, it would actually crawl up to the house and look into the windows in the addition and my brother's room and mine and my sister's room. That is utterly vile. The mental images that my mind is conjuring up reading this, horrific. There was a ghost who would crawl out of the crawl space on the house. It was a small opening on the side of the house. She had long black hair that covered her face most of the time and white, very pale skin. Every night, around midnight to 3 a.m, she would crawl out from under the house and then would stare into mine and my sister's room through the window. Then, when the sun would start to rise, she crawled back under the house. She would always push her face against the glass and spend hours standing there looking in. When you could see her eyes, they were dark, almost black, and somewhat beady. You can keep your idyllic deer on the front lawn if that's the price I've got to pay. Not having some The Ring / The Grudge looking girl looking at me all night. Nope. Another ghost that was quite prominent at this house was in the kids' bathroom. She also had dark hair that covered her face, pale skin, and wore a white nightgown type dress. The scariest part about her was that she didn't have eyes. You'd go into the bathroom and you'd see her reflection in the mirror or move the curtain in the shower and catch her standing there. She never said or did anything and you'd only see her for a few moments and then she'd be gone. However, there was one ghost who wasn't like the others growing up. We called him Blockhead. He was nice and comforting for us, as odd as it may sound. I think you deserve a little comfort after what I've just read. He was my older brother's imaginary friend when he was little. My mum had quite an interesting story when it comes to him. My mum at the time was pregnant with my older sister, and my brother was about 3 years old. He was sitting on the floor playing with his toy cars, talking. My mum asked him who he was talking to, and he said, Blockhead. My mum was intrigued, but chalked it up to a kid having an imaginary friend. But then she got to watch my brother roll his car across the floor. When it stopped rolling, she saw it pick back up and roll back to him. She was in shock. But that's not all Blockhead would do. There were times we'd get locked out of the house when taking out the trash or something. Even though we didn't lock the door, we'd always have assumed it was the other ghost doing it. But if you'd kindly asked Blockhead, he would open the door for you. Thank you, Blockhead, for making sure that I don't get eaten by the thing crawling on all fours. That is very kind of you. Along with seeing these ghosts, the lights and TVs would suddenly turn on and off in the house, water would turn on and things would frequently move. Cabinets would open and close. You'd be able to hear people whispering all the time and even hear them call your name. There would be footsteps in different rooms. These events would happen when you were alone at night or when everyone should have been asleep. But worse yet, they would happen when everyone was in one room together as well. These ghosts would more than happily lock you out of the house at night or in bad weather. Growing up, we always have had pets, and it isn't like we were the only ones being affected by these occurrences. Our pets were too. Our dogs would seemingly bark and growl at nothing. Our cats would hiss and throw fits. Over time, many of them would go from the sweetest animals to aggressive and lose their minds. It would occur in short spans of time as well, like 1 month they were our beloved pets, the next they were gone. We had to put down many pets due to this change in their personalities. There were only a few animals we ever owned who could handle the energy from the ghosts that we didn't lose to that house. We lived in that house for many years, and when I was born, we lived in that house already. We moved out when I was 12 years old, but we still own it to this day. After a couple of years, we had some friends who needed a place to stay, so we went to clean it up and get it ready for them, and the house greeted us back. It was quite unsettling. I do feel like that sort of house would just have an energy to it. You're not going to forget that in a hurry. As you age and time passes, you look back and wonder if it all truly happened. Flash forward multiple years, I was about 18 or 19 and my siblings, Mum and I, were all sitting in the living room of our new house, talking about our childhood home. We'd never discussed in the past the haunting and the ghosts with each other, but we were all able to recall the same ghosts, the same feelings of being haunted and stalked. At that point, we all knew it wasn't just our childhood imagination. Then add to it, our family friends who were staying in our childhood home at this time also brought up the same ghosts. except Blockhead. He seems to have moved with my family. But especially the girl who looks into the windows of the room that used to be mine and my sister's at night. Then add to everything, our friend stated that he didn't know why, but about 10 years prior to this point, he'd almost taken his life across the street from our house while drunk. He said that it felt as if something evil was controlling him. I feel like your friend may have needed his own Blockhead. Wow. For it all to affect so many animals over the years too, that is so sad. Overall though, it sounds like growing up in that house would have been exhausting. I do say that as the child who couldn't watch Goosebumps too close to bedtime because I would have had nightmares. But this next story from Ashley is slightly more lower key, but still unsettling nonetheless. I live in England and had this experience at school. We were getting onto the bus for a school trip and I was sat right at the back of the bus. I was just staring out the window at nothing really in particular. But then, as I looked into the door, I'm pretty sure was just a staff door in and out of the kitchen area, something weird came into view. A hooded figure, pushing something I couldn't quite make out. It looked in my general direction and I couldn't see its face, just darkness. I thought maybe it was someone pushing a pram, so I stood up to get a better look at just outside the window. But nothing. When I sat down, the figure was gone. I told my mum about it and she said, "You probably just had your first sighting of a ghost." Love that, Mum. No other explanation needed, you just saw a ghost. The contrast between the earlier story and now Ashley's mum as well. Love it. A similar story happened at home, probably a year or two after. I was in the kitchen late at night, which is right next to the living room. There's one of those sliding window things between the rooms, so you can hand something through for convenience. That window thing was closed, and it's one of the windows that is patterned, so you can't see through it clearly. I looked up after filling my drink to see a weird white shape, vaguely person-shaped, moving in there. I'm so glad that the window thing and the living room door were closed that night, because I had to walk past both to get to my room. I didn't tell anyone I saw that, but my mum had said that she had seen a ghost child in that house before. This was the same house where I'd got unexplained knocks on my bedroom door for 3 nights in a row. I do love that though, the relief of knowing that you wouldn't have to look inside the living room as you made your hasty exit. But a huge thank you to Wayne, Joshua, Bethany, Jordan, Ashley and the anonymous listener for sending in their stories from their childhoods. Interesting what came up time and time again in this one. The eyes, or lack thereof. Wayne's girl on the landing, the utterly demonic children on Bethany's drive and then in her sister's room, the peeping ghost under Jordan's house. Don't love it as a recurring theme, creepy ghost kids with dark voids of nothingness for eyes, or black beady little eyes in Jordan's case, which feels worse now I'm saying that. No thank you, little tiny terrors. But I do keep thinking back to that anonymous story with Victoria and the hand over the listener's hand. The idea that she just wanted someone to play with and found a way to do it. Just so sad, but also so sweet. But if you have a story that you'd like to share, something that you saw as a child that you never quite managed to explain away, or something that's happened more recently, I would absolutely love to hear all about it and possibly feature it in one of these episodes. So if you're up for it, please do email me at hello@don'tscareclaire.com or use the form pinned in the comment section and the description. But anyway, if you enjoyed this collection of stories as told to me by the real people who experienced them, then please do give the video a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories like this, make sure that you subscribe. I chat about the history behind the mystery as well as first-hand witness accounts every week. But anyway, that is all from me today. Go and get a drink of water. Stay hydrated. I cannot wait to chat with you more about the morbid, mysterious and macabre. So until next time, sleep safe. Bean's ignoring me because she was itching her ear violently, so I cleaned her ear out. I had the audacity, to clean her ear out. And so now she's not speaking to me.